Hi everyone, welcome Gavriel and Rabbi Asher Meza, our honorable guests. So we have this is our third podcast, me and Gavriel, and Rabbi Asher is our second official one here on the YouTubes and MN Global. So today's topic, we wanted to talk about the realistic steps that perhaps we can take as far as the Sanhedrin initiative and how it can integrate into the state of Israel. And I wanted to talk about that. But first, Gavriel, a couple words. How you doing? How's life? What's going on?
Good morning, Rabbi. Things are good. As normal around here, taking care of everything. How's things with you?
Yeah, thank you, Baruch Hashem. Yeah. We spoke earlier in our earlier podcast about how if we're talking about a judiciary system, then there should be fairness on all sides. If, quote unquote, the secular are demanding that the religious Jews should be in the army, so then there should be a mikveh, there should be a Beit Midrash where they can learn, a Beit Knesset where they can pray, there should be separation of men and women, there should be kosher food, there should be no issue growing a beard, there should be ministers or commanders or leadership, which are Talmidei Chachamim and religious, God-fearing Jews. There should be equality and cooperation between the religious and non-religious sectors. And we also assume that if let's say 2 years of mandatory service is demanded from the religious Jews, so then maybe also 2 years of yeshiva study for all the secular or the Arabs or whoever's joining the military should also be something that should be mandatory. Um, Gavriel, you said even further, you said that on a daily basis you believe that the soldiers should be studying Torah. Can you want to elaborate on that? Maybe explain yourself?
Yeah, sure. So, with that, I would agree with the idea, the concept of instituting 1 hour of Torah study every day as part of their mandatory training. Something that could be worked into the schedule. Maybe towards the end of the day, they should have like a little class, Torah study class in their bay, and meet with a rabbi and over a company level, and they do a Torah study daily, um, the minimum of an hour.
And you mentioned something about
All right, if I could chime in on this here.
yeah, sure,
Okay.
Asher, go ahead.
So then, if there's going to be an actual integration of the great court of Israel and daily life, like in that part of the planet, I like certain things I don't think should be forced on people. Just because I don't think halacha requires it, right? I mean, the Jewish system allows for people to be able, if they wanted to do the bare minimum and be integrated fully and be considered fully kosher Jews with the option of wanting to do more. So, for example, if you're a soldier, being that our legal system, our the halachic system is daily life, they are the civil laws of Israel. They should be proficient in the laws that have to do with war, 100%. Like the laws that have to do with cutting down trees, with like eradicating, let's say, like excrement from the camp. There's many halachas. I mean, found in particular in Hilchos Malachim of the Rambam that deal with kings and their wars and soldiers in general. So that you should be just as proficient in as if your profession was you know in some way being a shochet, shchita, whether you should know the laws that pertain to your profession. But in terms of trying to change the way people think, I don't think that the Torah standard was ever to control the way people uh, thought about things, but more to how people reacted to things. It was there to guide your behavior, not necessarily the way that you thought. Clearly, the way you think is going to affect your behavior in the long run. But I think that's the biggest turnoff
Well, Rabasha,
to people.
Rabasha,
Yeah.
I agree with what you're saying, and you are right to assume that a soldier, just like in any profession, should be well versed. And I'm just going to go through what you said: laws of war, how to cut down trees or when not to cut down trees, how to dispose of excrement, and so on. the laws of war of the Rambam, and not necessarily how to think, quote unquote. But that being said, that brings us to, if you're talking about minimum, there's also basic derech eretz baked into Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch tells us how to eat. The Shulchan Aruch tells us how to use the bathroom. The Shulchan Aruch tells us separation of tzniut, of modesty, how to dress. And these are things that even before you're a soldier, just to be a mensch or a human being with derech eretz based on the Torah, I think that should also be a foundation. Don't you think that that's,
No.
important?
So like I don't think that what the what Shulchan Aruch considers midat hasidut, right? Like the standard of being a decent person has to be something that's legislated. In terms of like when there was a Sanhedrin, the Sanhedrin itself had discussions, recorded discussions on derech eretz, but their sole function and authority was limited to halacha lemaisa. Just tell us what you want us to do, not to help us think correctly. That's what we don't want people to do. We just want to be told what to do, and people have their own rebbeim and they have their own communities, right? But you'd have to cater every Torah class according to that person's, personal minhagim. I think that the government should not be involved in indoctrinating people, right? But they should be involved in upholding the standard. The standard from a civil perspective is a Torah standard, but derech eretz is not something that you can legislate. You can only essentially legislate things that there are punishments for.
Right, but we would legislate. We wouldn't be legislating per se reward and punishment for actually keeping Shulchan Aruch. I think at this stage we're just talking about just learning halacha. Like I would want that all the soldiers in my platoon, for example, wash their hands before they eat bread, wash their hands when they leave the bathroom. These are basic stuff that I would assume are correct in a normal situation. Obviously, in a pikuach nefesh situation, the laws could change, or in a upset situation, the laws can change. But as a standard, as a normal thing, don't you think that there are some basic concepts? Prayer every morning for the soldiers. We know that the soldiers are in a great din, in a great justice, in a great sakana, in a great danger. Don't you think that they should have their own personal merits as part of? Not, in other words, I think that what you're talking about is more for the higher ups, the higher military branches should be aware of how to conduct military correctly. And I totally agree with you. And I actually think that there's a lot missing over there in the way of conducting military things. But I also think that on a personal level, on a lower level, there should also be basic, just if Torah study every day. I think it's healthy if, like we know the story of Yosef, if there's no water, which is Torah, then there's snakes and scorpions. In other words, what else would the soldier be involved in? There should be something that grounds the soldier in a Torah way. What do you think about that, though?
Yeah, so again, it goes back to what the standard is. I think what we should work on first is a manual to determine what is bare bones Judaism, which includes a halachic system. No one is going to put their stamp or their haskama on anything like that because it makes them look less devoted, less frum. Someone has to stick their neck out and say, you know what, if we're establishing a religious state, right, with, in this case, a religious army, we cannot use Shulchan Aruch as a standard because the Shulchan Aruch was never meant to be a halachic standard. Shulchan Aruch is the guide, to be a Jew in Chutz La'aretz, to overcome personal challenges. It has nothing to do with being a kosher citizen of biblical Israel. That means if you're running a nation, there has to be the opportunity, for people to do what's called bare bones, right? But bare bones is not Lubavitch, and it's not Panovich. Bare bones, as a matter of fact, is not even documented at this point. If someone really wanted like Isra V'Heter, form of Judaism,
So
they have to go
Asher,
back to the Mishnah.
can you give me one example of something that you think is overkill today in Judaism, but if you'd have to create a legislation for that, you would go for the bare bones? And can you give me a practical example?
Well, davening in the morning, for example, with the idea that if you're Sephardi, you're expected to say karbanos, and like everyone is adopted like a minik basuka de zimra, and on and on. People don't have the time for that, and that's not even the halacha. These are minhagim on top of minhagim, right? Instead of saying, we get it. Like, you just want to be a kosher Jew in Israel. So what do you have to say? Well, so we have like this manim we have to adhere to. There's the Shema, there's with the Amidah, and we limit the Kaddishes. And then there, I mean, you could bench if you use like Rav Sadagon's bencher in less than a minute, right? If we use
So Rabbi Asher, you want that,
Lubavitch as a standard,
right? Like my friend Rabbi Asher, Rabbi Bar Chaim from Machon Shiloh, he has a Birkat Hamazon on a business card that he gives out, like a small business card.
right, right.
Thank you,
That's
Hashem,
the
for the
standard.
food.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like the standard should be.
So would you agree? Like,
good?
what about an idea like a middle of the road approach to this?
No, not middle
Would
road. It has
that-
to be bare minimums when you're dealing with the society.
Right, when you're
Do
dealing with
what's
people that
required.
are just like you're basically saying a ger toshav. In other words, if you have Druze or Arab soldiers that are not even converted, but they have to keep Shabbat because they're in your gates, right? V'gerecha asher b'sharecha, he also has to keep Shabbat. So there's a new category now that we need to address, which is the ger toshav, right? Is that something that you're basically heading to, the Druze, the
Yeah,
Arabs?
because it doesn't exist. That's the thing. I mean, I wish someone would stick their neck out. There's so many rabbis quick to write books, for Noahites and stuff like that. Why isn't there a book? Like for a Jew who acknowledges, you know what, I'm weak. Okay, I can't keep up with davening in my local Chabad house, right? Give me the bare minimum. I want to be a part of you guys, but like keep me in mind. No one, unfortunately, sticks their neck out for that person because they don't want to in some way create a crutch like for people to abuse. I get that in everyday life, right? However, if you're building a country which is made up of many different peoples with many different levels of devotion, there has to be a bare minimum as the standard,
So
encouraging people to do
so
what's
let's
required
go on what you said.
and
You gave the
consider what's
example.
optional.
You gave the example of Shema and Shmona Esrei. Would you include the Birkot Shema in that minimum? From Yishtabach, the two brachos that we say before Shema?
What do you mean? I mean, like the Birkas HaShachar, I mean, have to be said, but that has nothing to do with Chakras. I mean, that we lump it in together nowadays because it's a minhag to do like all the brachas in the morning at once, right? When we don't have to. Like you're supposed to like do them like throughout the day. So there's a way here. Look, the standard should be do what's required and consider what's optional, right? Consider what's optional. If you want to be a chassid, like if you want to be told osarin, go right ahead, because there's room for that. But if you say the standard is nusach hari, then you've lost half the people.
But Rabbi Asher, let me ask you a
just
question. For example, Birkat Torah, yeah? So we say the Birkat Torah, and then we say 3 verses from the Torah, then we say a few verses from the Mishnah, so that we have basic chumash, which is Torah shebichtav, the written Torah, then Torah shebal peh,
Right.
the oral Torah. So now
No,
you're
we
going to tell me
fulfill our
that if
obligation
someone...
to be able to make the bracha. Like you're not
But,
supposed to do that, by the way.
but
I mean, that's what people have
that's the
done.
question. The question is like, oh, you soldiers won't be learning Torah today, so skip the Birkat Torah? Is that like how, like, in other words, how minimum is the bare minimum? That's my question to you.
That's actually the halacha, by the way. I mean, the halacha is that you're supposed to say each bracha as the opportunity arises. Like you're not supposed to just say, I mean, 3 pasukim here and 3 sugyas there just to fulfill your obligation in order for you to say the bracha. The brachas are there for when the opportunity arises, you say it. Right?
Well, Rabbi
You
Asher,
don't just knock them out in one shot.
just a joke, a half joke question, but would we catch you saying Birkat Torah right before you go live on TikTok, for example?
No, because I daven in a shul. I mean, I actually daven by
Oh.
Lubavitch.
Oh, okay,
Right?
okay.
But I know that most people, and I'm not that devout. I'm the worst of the worst, but like most people aren't even on my level. So like I want there to be one standard that we acknowledge is a standard, and everything else is extra. But no one is going to stick their neck out for that because every community feels that Moshe Rabbeinu like daven like them and held like them and poskin like them. This is the problem that we have because.
Are you familiar with Rabbi David Bar Chaim and his new siddur called
100% Nusach Eretz Israel? Yeah, yes.
So what do you think about that?
I mean,
What do you think about him?
I interviewed him, by the way. Like he knows of me.
Maybe you
what do I think
collaborate together to make this bare minimum, Ger Toshav version or something.
Well,
that the army
I mean, his
could use.
Nusach Eretz Israel, I mean, still includes a lot of minhagim, by the way. I mean,
Okay.
Tachanun, for the most part, when Nefilat HaPayim is a minhag. I mean, most people don't know that.
Right,
and he includes
Rabbi Asher, one second. The Shulchan Aruch says that when Moshe Rabbeinu went up for 40 days and 40 nights to beg for forgiveness, me and Gavriel, we just learned this. So it says one time that he was standing, one time that he was bowing, one time that he was sitting, begging for forgiveness from Hashem. And that's why during Tachnun when we do Ashamnu Bagamnu, we're standing, and then we do L'David, we're kind of with our hand over, that's kind of like bowing. And then we have the part where before we get up, when we say Avinu Malkeinu, we're still sitting. So everything about the Tachnun and all these little, what you call minhagim, yes, they might be minhagim, but they're all traceable back to to Maisa Avesim and Labanim. Now, okay, well, this brings us back to the main point, which is that you would, in order to create a new standard and say, let's say, okay, Ger Torshav, this is your nusach. If you do this, you're in the clear as long as you're serving, fighting for Am Yisrael in the army. X, Y, and Z. I think it all kind of comes together back to the Sanhedrin, which would be the power to be able to legislate something. But I do agree that someone needs to put together this bare bones minimum halachic standard, kind of like a first aid kit, especially for people that are just a ger toshav. They just happen to live in Eretz Yisrael, and just by de facto being in our gates, they need to keep Shabbat and they need to do different things. And the state is also expecting them to fight for Am Yisrael, and they're going to be doing it l'shem shamayim. So, do you think maybe? I mean, you're saying that it needs to be done. Do you have any ideas about who and what and how?
To quote Moreno, Rabbi David Bar Chaim, this is all the result of what he calls Galut Judaism.
Okay.
Right? That we walk around thinking that Shulchan Aruch is the standard. Shulchan Aruch colloquially may be the standard, but it is not the Judaism held by Rabbi Akiva or Rabbi Yehoshua ben Prachia. Right? That's what the standard is. The standard is what you're trying to establish here by recreating the standard, which was the Sanhedrin. So we're going to have to walk a few things back and say, like, now we're going to take off from where Rabbi Akiva left off.
Rabbi Asher, I want to ask you a question. When the Beis Yosef was writing the Shulchan Aruch, he was in Eretz Yisrael, correct?
He was it written in Sfat, or was it written when he was in Egypt or Spain? I mean, he was born in Spain.
Right.
The Shulchan Aruch project, yes. So, I mean, he finished it in Sfat.
Okay.
But, yeah.
Well, okay. So I'm just, now, who was in charge of Israel then? The Ottomans? Who was running the show here at the time?
So you're talking about in the 1500s,
Yeah.
probably the mid 1500s, 1540. I would assume the Ottomans, perhaps. I don't know.
Okay, so it was in a situation where he was in Eretz Yisrael, but it wasn't under a Jewish rule. It was under a Ummot HaOlam rule, correct?
Right.
And he exported the Shulchan Aruch to the Ramah, which burned his version in order not to create machloket in Am Yisrael. And the Ramah only wrote a pirush on the Beit Yosef Shulchan Aruch. So far, I'm correct.
The Ramah wrote a parish. No, like the Ramah that was written on the Shulchan Aruch, not on the Beis Yosef.
Okay,
I mean, Shulchan Aruch is like abridged Beis Yosef. I mean, like the Ramah wrote like on the Torah.
On the Torah,
and the Beis Yosef is built on the Torah. So Darchei Moshe, you're thinking of Darchei Moshe, which is on the Torah.
Okay.
But I mean, I didn't know he sent him a copy. I thought the Ramah just took it upon himself because he wanted to make his own Beis Yosef, but he wanted to remain relevant, so he inserted Minhagei Ashkenaz alongside Shulchan Aruch.
Right. So what I'm trying to say is the bottom line is that Torah Shebal Peh, Torah Lo Bashamayim, it is with us here, and it is up to us to paskin for every generation, and I believe that regardless, we're La Hamesim Yalalu Kav Lo Kol Yadidum, not the dead praise Hashem. We can of course with the rabbinical sages today close in and create this new category, which hasn't been relevant for the last 2,000 years.
Listen, I believe in you, Rabbi. Look, I believe in you. To quote William Wallace when talking to Robert the Bruce, at least in the movie Braveheart. If you lead them, they'll follow you, and I will also. I think that what you have to do is put Nusach Hari aside, Shulchan Aruch Harav aside, and come to some, actual derech that takes off from where Rabbi Akiva left off and say, look, we know that this is not what you have to do like in your community. However, if there's going to be a Sanhedrin made up of 70, Chachamim, unless they're all going to be, from the same dynasty, no one's going to get along. But if everyone agrees that Rabbi Akiva, didn't have Shulchan Aruch, I mean, he didn't have Rishonim, right? The authority Rabbi Akiva had was passed down to him through this process called smicha, right? Like, the reason it was so bare bones is because that's how you run a country. Like, you can't, if you would try to implement Shulchan Aruch in Eretz Israel, it would look like Iran, right? And the fighting would be even worse. Okay.
So once again, Gavriel, you see me and Rabbi Asher talking now. Can you give us your perspective, looking out from this, you've been in the military.
Well,
Yeah, go ahead.
so I mean, I'm trying to, listen to the, Rabbi Asher and try to hear him out. And I understand what he's saying on a national level with so many different type of people living in the land right now. I get what he's saying because it would cause an uprise, because basically one face of Judaism would be, stamped as the official Judaism. And so I hear what he's saying. I would just like, but like the bare bone minimum. But what is that? Could that be basically what Asher has already been known to teach? Torah, Torah Judaism, Mishnah, keeping the Mishnah, and then like maybe everything else, just an extra whatever your branch of Judaism does. Is that what he's referring to? Would that
Yeah,
be
in other words, Rabbi Asher, the
fair to
question
say?
is, do we start from the top or do we go in from the bottom? In other words, do we try to re-walk the path of the Beis Yosef, how he wrote the Shulchan Aruch, or do we go from the Shulchan Aruch and just kind of take off a few things? That's the question.
All right.
I would say start at the foundation of everything and then reconstruct it on the way up. If you do it the other way, it's just going to collapse.
So I think that you guys have exposed me here. I was the first Sanhedrin initiative, even though I didn't call it that. The reason I resonate so much with that term is because that is the foundation of Judaism. The Sanhedrin, like from a theological and practical perspective, even the way that we understand the Torah is through the lenses of the rabbis. The Sanhedrin initiative is so important because it's bringing us back to the basics, right? And again, like taking off from where our rabbis left off. And we understand that there's many practices and understandings that stuck with the Jewish people because of exile. But what happens in exile stays in exile. And even like if like Shulchan Aruch was finished in Tzfat, it was still under the occupation. I mean, it's still a form of Golus, right? So that's what the Sanhedrin initiative is. I mean, to go back to the basics. That doesn't mean that you have to toss out your customs, things that make Judaism colorful, but we do have to make a distinction. We have to come to some conclusion that real bare bones Judaism does not look like Satmar. And it does not look like Bells or Vishnitz, right? It looks like, something that would have existed even in the time of Jesus, right? Which is still halachically sound. It's built off of Torah Sheba'al Peh. But, Amarayim, Rishonim, Achronim aside,
But
right?
Rabbi Asher,
That's the real Sanhedrin
deeper,
initiative.
First of all, yes, and I think even deeper than that, the Ger Torshav is someone who, just by de facto being in the Holy Land already, he doesn't have to convert, doesn't have to snip, he doesn't have to do nothing. The fact that he enters our gates, he is obligated to conduct himself, especially if he's going to join the army. We know that the Rambam says that even working electricity or water the wells, or you're not allowed to give that job to someone who's not a God-fearing person or someone that's not under covenant, under contract.
Or born Jewish. According to the Rambam, like he's incorrect on that. Like the Rambam goes further and he says that someone who's born Jewish, not even a convert, could dig wells for irrigation. And it has nothing to do with like Gerim Toshavim. I'm just saying, I don't agree with everything the Rambam says, but that's his opinion. Because they use it against converts all the time. Like, oh, you can't be a rabbi because you can't even dig an irrigation well. But that's for the rabbis to argue.
Okay, so you're saying that's okay. So that's something that needs to be unpacked as well to see how deep that goes.
Right,
But definitely,
for
Rabbi Asher, we have police in Israel right now that don't keep Shabbat. When they see an Orthodox Jew, they'll use all the laws to screw him over, as they say, and to make his life
Hmm.
miserable if they can. So we're talking about people that are in the military or in the police force or judges that they or politicians that will use their power to undermine the state of Israel. We had just now Palestinian Authority police officers, which were in Jerusalem when they're not supposed to be there with weapons in cars, doing all kinds of things. They were caught by the regular Israeli police. But what I'm trying to say is we have a problem, and this is, I think, one of the things that Gavriel was addressing. You need to have clear alliances when you're fighting for the children of Israel in the Holy Land. And the way to preserve that and to maintain that would be definitely to integrate some Torah study into the military, create some kind of education system for the soldiers. If you want to demand army service from,
Sensitivity training,
yeah,
like HR calls it, yeah, sensitivity training, right?
correct, because your
Yeah,
allegiance
yeah,
need to.
exactly. Like a bare minimum study. I was like bare minimum study of the Torah for people who are serving in the military. Um, bare minimum, or just understanding Jewish law and understand, and stuff. Just the bare minimum study. It don't have to go too deep into, they don't have to go into the shulchan, or they don't have to do all that. Just the bare minimum of Torah law, Torah understanding.
100%. All right, so we're 2 minutes out of the end of this meeting. So, Rabbi Asher, would you like to say some closing statements, or Gavriel? Gavriel, closing statements.
So yeah. So basically, I think that today was an interesting discussion. I would definitely say that Asher Meza did, he did provide, a different perspective on things, and it was edifying. It was good. Yeah. And I will say, yeah, he did bring some nuance to the conversation that maybe, me and you have not even thought about. And so I would take that in consideration, and we can expound on these things and think more on these things. And, like I said, it was a good conversation. And I appreciate Rabbi Asher for being able to come in.
All right, and I think that the politicians in Israel, I'm sure that speak English and their friends that will pass this message on. I think that there is a lot to unpack here, and of course, the instability of the court system can be switched up with the Sanhedrin initiative. At least the Sanhedrin initiative should be part of something. I think that this is something that the state of Israel desperately needs. It needs to stop being able to be undermined. We had obviously rogue operatives on October 7, helping our enemies, and I hope that the kind of education and moral structure that the Torah brings to the state of Israel will secure the borders of Israel for generations to come and create a lot of stability. And I hope that the left and the secular, whether they might not, agree with everything, but I hope that they understand exactly what we just spoke about. So with that, thank you everybody for being with us. I'm going to end the recording because
So there's one thing quick I want to
go ahead.
say,
You have
like, and I want
10
to encourage
seconds.
you,
Go
like,
ahead.
in this area. And sure, like, I want to give you chizuk. Like the Chafetz Chaim, he wrote a small sefer, like for soldiers that were being conscripted into the Tsar's army, that covered all the halachas that a soldier needed to do. I mean, it's in a Hebrew book.